No one failed because they are weak. No one stayed stuck because they weren't born disciplined. This narrative people repeat out there, the one that says you need to wake up motivated, overhaul your entire life, or become someone completely different overnight, is the biggest lie of the modern world. If motivation were enough, you'd have changed already. If willpower were everything, your life would already be different. The truth is something else, and they probably never told you. What truly transforms someone is not intensity. It's identity. And this explains why so many people try to change and end up right back where they started. They want new results while keeping the same identity as before. They want discipline without seeing themselves as disciplined. They want purpose without acting like someone who lives with intention. They want victory without building the version of themselves that actually wins. And when that doesn't work, because it never works, they believe they are the problem. But what if I told you the problem was never you, it was the method? What if I proved that real growth doesn't come from big changes, but from micro decisions, so small they almost look silly? What if I showed you that there is an ancient Japanese system capable of transforming anyone, absolutely anyone, into someone 1% better every single day, without insane effort, without motivation, without drama? Get ready, because this audiobook is not just another motivational talk that evaporates from your mind in 2 hours. Here, you will discover why your mind sabotages your plans, how to reprogram your identity silently, and how to build a routine so simple that even your most tired version can follow it. You will understand why Japanese monks have always been masters of human evolution, and how each of the 5 pillars they created can change your life in a way so deep you might not even recognize the version of yourself that exists today. And before you think, this is too hard, let me tell you something important. The system you're about to learn was made for people who are tired, busy, full of flaws, fear, and imperfections. This system was made exactly for you. Throughout this audiobook, you will realize you don't need to change the world. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to turn into a Zen monk. You only need to do what anyone can do, but almost no one does. Evolve 1% a day. That's it. As simple as that. As powerful as that. But be careful. Once you understand the system, you won't be able to use the old excuses anymore. Because when truth appears, life forces you to grow. And you're about to discover a truth very few people ever have the chance to learn. Take a deep breath. What you're about to hear may be the beginning of your next version. Stronger, lighter, more conscious, more aligned with who you were born to be. Your journey starts now. Christopher always believed he needed a big turning point to change his life, until he realized that this mindset kept him stuck in the same place. It's interesting how this way of thinking lives in so many people. The idea that everything only changes when something huge, almost cinematic, happens. But while waiting for that magic event, a person sinks even deeper. And this is where the seed of an identity shift appears, that silent movement that begins long before any visible victory. The Japanese mentor would say the true turning point doesn't live in impact, but in subtlety. When he looked back, he saw his failures came from betting everything on radical transformations. Extreme diets, gym promises that lasted 2 days, that desire to become a different person overnight. But abrupt change demands too high a price. It doesn't last. That's why so many fall. There's no relentless consistency, that almost stubborn persistence built in the details. And when the detail fails, everything collapses. Japanese monks understood this phenomenon centuries before modern science called it sustainable behavior. They realized humans function better when working with what they have, not with what they imagine they should have. Instead of promising to climb the mountain, they started by mastering a single step. And that step, repeated with relentless consistency, created Kaizen discipline like an inner muscle. The mind changed before the body. Many people today look at these teachings and think they're too simple to work. But simplicity is exactly what works, because it removes resistance. The wrong method doesn't fail due to lack of effort, but due to excess. It's the classic story of someone trying to transform everything at once and blaming themselves when it doesn't work. But the problem isn't them. It's the method that demands too much and returns too little. Purpose alignment is impossible that way. Christopher realized the biggest error in his journey was fighting against himself, as if he could beat the force of habit with brute strength. He tried to bend his own mind when he really needed to guide it. When he finally understood this, something started shifting inside him. It was subtle but real. It was that identity shift that happens when you stop dreaming of a different life and take one step, just one, in the right direction. And maybe that's why so many never achieve what they want. They confuse intensity with direction. Intensity works for 1 or 2 days. Direction changes the entire destiny. The Japanese monks knew that real transformation isn't about perfection, but about continuous adjustment. Each day 1% better. Each action reinforcing Kaizen discipline. That's how the ordinary becomes extraordinary. No fireworks, just daily progress. A simple example. Many people want to start reading to become more disciplined, but they immediately choose a complex book like Anti-Fragile. They think it's beautiful to start with the impossible, but it doesn't work. The mind resists, the reading stalls, and the person returns to zero. If they started with something lighter, like The Power of Habit, they would build a foundation. Small victories produce relentless consistency, and that's what creates a lifelong reader. Another common example. Someone decides to start investing money from scratch. They go straight into risky stocks or crypto without understanding the basics. Then they lose everything and say, investing isn't for me. Again, the problem isn't them, it's the method. If they started learning how to build an emergency fund or studying safer fixed income options, they would gain financial purpose alignment and emotional safety. Small seeds, big harvests. Christopher understood he needed to stop waiting for motivation, because motivation is volatile. It appears and disappears like summer rain. If you depend on it, you never grow roots. What really works is Kaizen discipline, doing the smallest possible action every day, until that minimum becomes natural. And when it becomes natural, it becomes a new pattern. And when it becomes a pattern, it becomes a new you. That's how a habit is born without suffering. This principle is also seen in athletes. None of them begin by running marathons. They start by walking. Then they jog. Then they run. The body adapts because the mind has already understood the ritual. And ritual is always stronger than motivation. When you create relentless consistency, the body just follows the script. This applies to training, food, study, career, everything. Small rituals are maps of purpose alignment. Christopher realized that for his whole life, he had tried to change as someone tries to put out a fire with gasoline. He intensified the effort, believing that intensity meant transformation. But too much intensity is the enemy of continuity. The mind tires, the body gives up. But when he put his energy into what was possible, not what was perfect, he began to bloom. And this blooming, even discreet, brought a deep identity shift. The monks taught that true change only happens when you respect the natural rhythm of life. Trying to change too fast is like pulling a flower to make it grow. You rip out the roots. But slow and steady rhythm creates deep roots. That's what protects from relapses. It's relentless consistency elevating identity to a new level. And when identity changes, everything changes with it. A useful practice many ignore is writing down every micro-victory of the day. It seems silly, but it works. When you record each step, no matter how small, the mind sees progress. And where there is progress, there's motivation. A simple note like, "Drank water today," is enough to generate Kaizen discipline. It's proof you're moving. And movement creates more movement. It's curious how the wrong method makes people feel weak, when in reality they're trying to win a battle with the wrong weapons. When Christopher understood this, he felt relief. He saw he was never lazy. He was just overwhelmed by unrealistic expectations. The feeling of failure evaporated when he adopted the right rhythm. And with this rhythm came emotional purpose alignment. He also learned a powerful truth. What seems too small today becomes huge tomorrow. A glass of water, 10 steps, 1 page read, all of that accumulates. And when it accumulates with relentless consistency, it becomes monumental strength. The human mind underestimates the power of the minimum repeated, but it's exactly the minimum that builds the maximum. That's how anyone can start an identity shift, even without resources, strength, or motivation. Finally, Christopher understood something that would change everything. Transformation doesn't begin when you change your actions, but when you change the method behind your actions. The right method releases energy, clarity, and focus. It creates a possible path. And when you step onto that path, even timidly, you're already forming a new identity. The next step would be discovering how to apply this method to practical situations in life. And that's where his story would gain even more depth. Christopher always thought he needed to start with something big to prove to himself that he was committed. But this thought, despite being seductive, was exactly what kept him paralyzed. The pressure of the perfect start blocked any attempt. So when his mentor suggested something almost ridiculous, drink 1 glass of water every morning, he laughed nervously. But there was the seed of the identity shift he desperately needed. On the first day, the action seemed far too small. 1 glass of water? That wouldn't change his life. But even so, he did it. And for the first time in years, he felt he had kept a promise to himself, no matter how small. That simple gesture awakened something deep, the perception of his own value. Relentless consistency is born this way, in commitments that fit in the palm of your hand but weigh tons inside your heart. What's curious is that, by repeating this ritual for a few days, the glass stopped being just water. It became a silent reminder that he could start and finish something. This made his mind relax, because it finally found a method that didn't demand superhuman strength. Kaizen discipline began forming organically, without pressure, without suffering, just with presence. It was the beginning of an inner purpose alignment. This is where many people go wrong. They want to change but choose challenges so big that they only reinforce the narrative of, "I can't do it." Christopher did the opposite. He chose something impossible to fail. This creates a micro-victory that nourishes self-confidence. And when self-confidence grows slowly, it grows roots. This is how an identity shift begins to take shape. The Japanese monks called this starting with what doesn't scare you. The human mind runs from what is too big, but moves toward what is light. When Christopher drank his glass of water, his mind didn't resist. It accepted. And more importantly, it learned. Small rituals train the brain to recognize patterns of success. This is science, but it's also applied philosophy. It's raw purpose alignment. Many might look at this gesture and think it's too little. But little, repeated daily, becomes much. An investor doesn't start by putting thousands into stocks. They start by saving $20. A reader doesn't begin with an 800-page book. They start with 3 pages a day. Christopher was learning, in practice, the value of relentless consistency, the mother of all sustainable transformation. On the 10th day, something interesting happened. He no longer wanted to drink the glass of water because he had to. He wanted to because that tiny action had become part of who he was. Kaizen discipline was no longer a conscious effort. It was becoming identity. This is powerful because identity requires no strength. It simply happens. Without realizing it, he was becoming someone who keeps promises. This feeling inspired him to observe other areas of life where he could apply the same logic. He realized that if 1 glass of water could ignite such deep change, other microactions could open even bigger doors. This kind of thinking is the first sign of purpose alignment spreading into multiple areas of life. When the mind aligns, the body follows. Christopher had always struggled to trust himself because he carried a history of failed attempts. But each morning, when he drank that water, something cracked in that old pattern, as if he whispered to himself, "This time is different." And it truly was. An identity shift doesn't come from force. It comes from self-respect. And self-respect comes from keeping promises that are small and achievable. It's interesting how his body also responded differently. He felt more awake, lighter, with a clearer mind. It wasn't the water itself, but the symbol behind it. Repetition can reorganize inner chemistry. This subtle improvement strengthened his relentless consistency even more. This is something everyone should try. An action so small it eliminates all excuses. One day he told his mentor he felt strange celebrating something so silly. The mentor smiled and replied, "The fool ignores the small. The wise honor what strengthens." That sentence branded itself into his mind. He realized that for years he had rejected small beginnings because his pride wanted something grand. Now he understood that simplicity isn't weakness, it's strategy. If you want to apply this today, start with something so simple you cannot fail. Make your bed. Read one paragraph. Walk for 5 minutes. Save $5. Write one line in your journal. What matters isn't the size. It's the relentless consistency you build. Small acts repeated shape a mental pathway impossible to ignore. That pathway is where your new identity is born. Christopher also discovered that small changes have the power to silence self-criticism. A large part of his suffering came from the belief that he failed at everything. But now he had daily proof that he could do something right. This is transformational. When you prove yourself trustworthy in small things, your mind relaxes. And with a relaxed mind, Kaizen discipline expands effortlessly. Interestingly, the process also affected his self-esteem. He noticed that honoring a single morning habit allowed him to look at himself with more respect. This created emotional space for bigger changes. A person who respects themselves in small tasks becomes capable of aligning deeper areas: health, relationships, career, spirituality. It was just the beginning of expansion. And like every growth process, something inside him began asking for the next step. Not a bigger step out of arrogance, but a step consistent with who he was becoming. That inner calling moves every transformation. He could feel that something new was about to unfold, something that would bridge this humble beginning with the next phase, requiring more awareness and more balance. When Christopher began to master the habit of drinking water, he realized the next challenge didn't need to be huge. It only needed to be coherent with who he was becoming. That's when he learned about the principle of Harai Hachibu, the Japanese practice of eating until 80% full. The idea seemed simple, but carried profound wisdom. And above all, it demanded a new level of identity shift, stopping the habit of eating to fill an emotional void and becoming someone who eats to live well. On the first day applying Harai Hachibu, he placed only half the usual amount of food on his plate. That alone made him reflect on how, for years, he had used food as emotional anesthesia. That reduction brought clarity. He realized that by moderating himself, he was moderating his impulses. It was a physical practice with psychological effects. And deep down, it was Kaizen discipline in its purest form, small adjustments transforming big behaviors. This philosophy forced him to pay attention to his own rhythm. Before, he ate too fast, as if he were always running from something. Now he needed to eat slowly, savor the flavors, notice the point when his body said enough. He created a ritual, and rituals create relentless consistency because they turn loose actions into habits with soul. The more he repeated it, the more he realized this wasn't a diet. It was purpose alignment at the table. He also realized that moderating himself with food was teaching him to moderate himself in life, savoring a pause, respecting his body's limits, saying no when he had already given enough. All of this began to emerge from that simple gesture. And slowly, he understood what Japanese monks had known for centuries. Excess doesn't nourish, it burdens. True strength lies in balance, not exaggeration. In the beginning, of course, there was resistance. That inner voice said, "But you've always eaten a lot, why change now?" That voice is common in everyone. It represents the old identity fighting to survive. But Christopher was already in a different stage. His identity shift was active, expanding. And when identity changes, the body naturally follows. Harai Hachibu fit perfectly, like a missing piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. One thing that helped him was replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of thinking, "I'm eating too little," he began asking, "How does my body respond to this?" And that shift is powerful. Curiosity opens doors, judgment closes them. By observing his own reactions, he noticed he felt lighter, more alert, more present. Small changes, big effects. And of course, there were the social challenges. Family dinners, outings with friends, that one uncle saying, "Eat more, you're barely eating anything." But Christopher learned to hold his purpose, without conflict. He would simply smile and say something like, "I'm just listening to my body today." This showed relentless consistency, because he maintained his purpose even under social pressure. A true expression of identity shift. Some days, he surprised himself with his own self-control. The smaller plate made him truly taste the food. He connected with the moment, This presence made him notice emotional patterns. Hunger wasn't hunger. It was anxiety, boredom, automatic behavior. Recognizing this liberated him. Moderation turned into clarity, and clarity generates purpose alignment. If you want to apply Harai Hachibu, begin like he did, putting less food on your plate. No need to calculate, weigh, or measure anything. Just reduce. Eat slowly. Respect the pause. Let your body speak. And when it speaks, listen. This simple gesture teaches Kaizen discipline because it trains your mind to recognize limits. And limits are the foundation of true self-control. Christopher also used a practical strategy, waiting 2 minutes after finishing his plate before taking more. It was impressive how, in those 2 minutes, his body often said, "I'm satisfied." That pause became his superpower. Small pauses create awareness. Awareness creates new choices. And new choices create identity shift in real time. In some moments, he even laughed to himself, thinking about how he always believed that changing habits required suffering, when in reality, change began when he stopped punishing himself. Moderation removed emotional weight from food. It made everything lighter, simpler, more human. That lightness created space for relentless consistency to flow naturally. And as expected, results appeared. He didn't just lose weight. He gained vitality. His digestion improved. His mind grew clearer. Japanese monks would say this is the natural result of harmonizing body and purpose. When the body is not overloaded, the mind directs its energy to what matters. That's purpose alignment lived daily. He realized eating less didn't mean living less. It meant living better. He chose foods with more presence, more nutritional value, more intention. This brought more energy. The energy fueled motivation. The motivation fueled Kaizen discipline. And discipline fueled his new identity. Everything connected, everything organic, everything gradual. It was also clear that Harai Hachibu changed his emotional relationship with food. He no longer saw food as escape, but as a tool to nourish the body that supported the life he wanted to build. This strengthened his inner responsibility. When food stopped being anesthesia, clarity expanded. New identity, new choices. And once he mastered the step, something inside him prepared for what came next. Because the journey of growth doesn't pause when you overcome a habit. It invites you to the next level. And this next level involved movement, purpose, and a deeper reason to continue evolving. When Christopher decided he was ready to move forward on his journey, he realized he didn't need to run a marathon to prove anything. He just needed to walk. Literally, 20 meters. The same distance between his front door and the gate outside. It sounds small, but for someone disconnected from his own body for years, it was a powerful new beginning. A simple movement announcing a new stage of identity shift, now guided by intention. In the first days, he walked slowly, almost embarrassed by how quickly he became out of breath. But the inner mentor he had been building reminded him softly, "It's not about speed, it's about direction." That sentence echoed in his mind whenever he thought about quitting. The short walk turned into a ritual. Ritual becomes relentless consistency. And consistency creates a kind of strength no one sees outwardly, but everyone feels inside. Over time, the walk stopped being just physical exercise. It became a meeting with himself. Each step made a different sound, as if the ground responded to his effort. He began to see this habit as part of the Kaizen discipline he'd been developing. Tiny daily advances, almost imperceptible, yet building a lighter body and a stronger mind. A transformation happening quietly, but steadily. And it was during these walks that he began reflecting on what he truly wanted for his life. For the first time in a long time, he felt mental space to think about the future without fear. His mind, once heavy, now moved lightly. That space is where Ikigai is born, the subtle combination of movement and purpose. He began to realize he wasn't walking just to lose weight. He was walking to exist again. One day, something unexpected happened. His daughter, who always watched him from a distance, asked if she could walk with him. Her question hit Christopher's chest with a burst of meaning. The walk, once a solitary effort, now held color, companionship, and emotion. Without knowing, he had found his Ikigai, the purpose that gives meaning to effort, the reason that makes the journey worthwhile. Pure purpose alignment. Her presence changed everything. He no longer walked simply to recover. He walked to be someone present in her future. This kind of reason transcends motivation. It turns discipline into devotion. Relentless consistency strengthened naturally, because now there was something bigger than discomfort. When you find your why, the how becomes light. And for Christopher, that why had curious eyes and small steps. The conversations during their walks were simple but deep. She talked about school, friends, little dreams. He talked about courage, choices, and how sometimes life asks us to start over. It felt like both were rebuilding something. She, her image of her father. He, his image of himself. That emotional bond reinforced his identity shift in a way that was invisible but powerful. It's interesting how the body responds differently when movement gains purpose. Christopher felt the 20 meters shrinking. Soon it was 50. Then 100. Kaizen discipline doesn't demand effort. It expands naturally. He didn't realize he was walking more. He simply felt like continuing. That's how habits grow. Without warning, without pressure, without drama. Only with meaning. If you want to apply this, start like he did. Choose a minimal movement and a reason to do it. You can walk to the end of the street thinking about something you love. Stretch for 2 minutes while giving thanks for the day. Wash your face and breathe deeply, imagining who you want to be a year from now. Small movement rituals unlock big regions of clarity in the mind. That's purpose alignment in action. During one of these walks, Christopher had a striking realization. He looked at his daughter laughing about something silly and thought, "She deserves a father who lasts." That sentence became a mantra, a reminder that effort without purpose is just exhaustion. But effort with purpose becomes fuel. And that fuel pushed him forward, even on the difficult days. Emotional identity shift. Each day, he noticed he grew less tired. His body, once rigid, now adapted. His breathing adjusted. His heart responded with more strength. And this physical response nourished his confidence. The walk stopped being a task and became a symbol. Proof that he was alive, present, and evolving. Relentless consistency was becoming a lifestyle. He also became more aware of tiny beauties around him. The soft wind, the changing color of the sky, a bird landing on a wire. Things he never noticed before because he lived on autopilot. Now, with each conscious step, he felt the world again. This is Ikigai, finding meaning in the simple, the present, the now. The walk didn't just change his body, it changed his perception. On a drizzly day, he considered skipping the walk, but his daughter appeared with an umbrella and said, "Let's go anyway, Dad." That melted every excuse. How could he refuse a moment like that? The rain became a metaphor. He realized life also rains, wets, and bothers. But if the purpose is big enough, you walk even soaked. Purpose alignment doesn't dissolve in minor obstacles. Over time, the walk became sacred. It didn't matter if he was tired, busy, or distracted. He knew that once he took the first step, the rest flowed naturally. This is how habits born from the soul work. The beginning requires intention, but continuity requires meaning. And he had meaning in abundance. It felt like every step whispered, "You're heading in the right direction." And with this consistent movement, Christopher began to sense his journey was about to enter an even deeper phase. Because when you move with purpose, you inevitably encounter your imperfections along the way. And dealing with them would become the next major challenge. A challenge combining acceptance, courage, and an ancient Japanese philosophy capable of turning setbacks into fuel. Christopher knew he was evolving, but he also knew that no real journey moves in a straight line. Life has curves, potholes, sunny days, and storms. And it was exactly on the cloudy days that he discovered the strength of Wabi-Sabi, the Japanese philosophy that honors imperfection and sees beauty even in what is cracked. For the first time, he realized that his path didn't need to be perfect. It needed to be authentic. And that understanding awakened a new stage of identity shift. The first relapse came on a silent night, when he ate more than he intended. Before, this would have been reason enough to give up. But now, he took a deep breath and observed his behavior with curiosity, not guilt. This movement is one of the pillars of Kaizen discipline. Adjust instead of abandon. He understood that the relapse didn't cancel his relentless consistency. It simply revealed where the path still needed light. Wabi-Sabi taught Christopher to stop punishing himself when things didn't go as planned. He began to see beauty in his own process, in the marks of the journey, in the flaws that showed where he was learning. It's like those Japanese bowls repaired with gold. They don't hide the cracks, they highlight them. He realized his failures were part of his story, part of building his inner purpose alignment. And that's when the philosophy of Ganbaru came in, meaning persist beyond what you think is possible. Christopher realized that true power wasn't in never falling, but in rising with more awareness. The fall revealed old patterns, but also revealed new strength. Ganbaru doesn't demand heroism, it demands presence. It asks you to remain firm even when your inner world tries to pull you back to your old self. In the following months, there were other stumbles. Days when he didn't walk. Days when he lost focus. Days when he felt like giving up. But instead of feeling ashamed, he asked himself, "What is this trying to teach me?" That question changed everything, because it removed emotional weight and brought clarity. This is how true resilience is born, not with brute force, but with understanding. During one of these slips, he realized something profound. The person he used to be would see the relapse as defeat, but the person he was becoming saw it as part of the process. This is identity shift in practice. When your identity changes, your interpretation of failure changes too. He no longer felt hostage to old habits. Now he was a conscious observer guiding his own progress. Christopher also began practicing something from Wabi-Sabi, leaving small visible reminders, like brief phrases on simple paper. On one he wrote, "Beauty is in the process." On another, "Rising is part of it." These reminders were emotional anchors, holding his mind steady on turbulent days. Tiny rituals like these are powerful tools to maintain purpose alignment, even when motivation disappears. Ganbaru, on the other hand, taught him to honor invisible effort, the kind no one sees, but that transforms everything. The effort to say, "Not today, but tomorrow I'll return." Or the effort to drink water even without wanting to. Or the effort of tying his shoes to walk when his mind invents excuses. It's this quiet strength that builds relentless consistency and creates deep roots. If you want to apply Wabi-Sabi today, start by accepting that your journey will never be perfect. Write down your failures without judgment. Observe your patterns. Honor your learning. Don't try to erase mistakes. Learn from them. And if you want to apply Ganbaru, choose a small gesture of perseverance today. Something minimal but real. Make your bed. Drink water. Make an important call. Study for 5 minutes. This is how you train the soul. Christopher realized that accepting his imperfections reduced the emotional weight of change. This created internal space for new actions to grow without resistance. Guilt consumes energy. Acceptance generates energy. And with renewed emotional energy, Kaizen discipline flowed naturally, like a river finding its path. This was living proof that imperfection doesn't block evolution, it fuels it. Interestingly, while accepting his flaws, he also became more responsible. The mix of Wabi-Sabi and Ganbaru created a rare balance, compassion with responsibility, self-love with firmness. He didn't torture himself, but he also didn't get complacent. That balance is where purpose alignment grows, with more strength and depth. One night, while reflecting on his progress, he realized he was more patient with himself, kinder, and paradoxically, more disciplined. He understood that discipline without kindness becomes punishment. Kindness without discipline becomes stagnation. But discipline with kindness becomes transformation. This understanding expanded his relentless consistency like never before. One day, after an emotional relapse, he went out for a walk even without wanting to. And it was during that walk that he had one of the most important realizations of his entire journey. I don't need to be perfect to continue. I just need to continue. That sentence became his new internal compass. And the more he repeated it, the stronger his identity shift grew. Deep down, each fall became a reminder that real change is not an event, but a relationship. A relationship with yourself, your history, your purpose. And like any real relationship, there will be easy days and hard days. What matters is staying. Ganbaru teaches this. Wabi-Sabi teaches this. His own heart teaches this. And he listened. And as he consolidated this mindset of acceptance and perseverance, something new began to grow inside him. A transformation so deep it wasn't just in his body or habits, but in his essence. He didn't realize it yet, but the next chapter of his journey would reveal even greater changes, both outside and within. Christopher never imagined that small steps could generate such a deep change. When he started the journey, he just wanted to survive his own discouragement. But as each habit connected to the next, something greater began to rise inside him. It wasn't just weight loss, it was a silent rebirth, an identity shift unfolding between the lines of everyday life, as if his soul were finding its natural rhythm again. After 18 months, the scale showed 52 kilos less, but that number didn't remotely represent the real dimension of his transformation. He walked differently, spoke differently, decided differently, acted differently. It was as if life had been reorganized from the inside out. Relentless consistency had created space for a new kind of strength, a quiet, confident strength full of purpose alignment. His family felt the change as well. His daughter, who once carried a hint of worry in her eyes, now had pride stamped on her smile. His wife, who always believed in his potential, now saw the man he was becoming, not perfect, but whole. The home gained more lightness. Conversations gained more presence, and the house, once quiet, now vibrated with hope. True transformation never stays only in the individual. It spreads. At work, Christopher also blossomed. Co-workers noticed his new posture, calmer, firmer, more present. His energy had changed. And when energy changes, the environment responds. He began leading projects with renewed confidence, making decisions with clarity, facing challenges without panic. The Kaizen discipline that started with a glass of water was now shaping even his professional capacity. It's interesting how discipline in one area creates a domino effect in all others. The daily walks taught him to face bigger challenges without fear. Harai Hachibu taught him to moderate emotional impulses. Wabi-Sabi taught him to accept his humanity. And Ganbaru taught him to persist where he once gave up. This combination shaped a new version of himself, one finally willing to own his destiny, that he also began inspiring others without even noticing. Co-workers asked how he managed to change so much. Friends wanted to know the secret, and he always answered the same thing: I started small. That answer seemed too simple for those expecting a magical solution, but it was exactly that simplicity that made the transformation sustainable. Purpose alignment never comes from exaggeration, it comes from clarity. His physical health made a monumental leap. His body, once overloaded, now functioned in harmony. He slept better, breathed better, thought better. Even his self-esteem had transformed. He felt worthy again, worthy of respect, worthy of care, worthy of a future. That feeling is one of the strongest signs of a consolidated identity shift, when a person finally recognizes themselves as capable. And deeper than that, Christopher recovered something he thought he had lost forever: his own essence. He felt joy in simple things again, curiosity to learn, desire to explore new paths. His mind grew lighter, his heart more open. This inner rebirth is what truly defines true transformation, because it happens in silence, away from the spotlight, yet changes everything around it. That he became more patient with himself, more compassionate, more present. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Now he moved with purpose, not pressure. Relentless consistency had become natural, like breathing. He didn't force discipline. He lived discipline. It was a lifestyle built brick by brick, habit by habit, choice by choice. That is the power of Kaizen discipline. It makes evolution inevitable. Curiously, the more he evolved, the less he needed external validation. He felt satisfied with himself, and that quiet satisfaction made him even stronger. People trusted him because he began trusting himself. That inner alignment, that long-sought purpose alignment, had finally become part of who he was, not just something he desired. During quiet moments of reflection, Christopher realized that everything he had lived, the setbacks, the advances, the doubts, the discoveries, all belonged to the same mosaic. Nothing had been wasted. Even his mistakes helped shape his journey. Wabi-Sabi had taught him this. Beauty lives in imperfections, and evolution lives in embracing them. Each emotional scar was now part of the strength that carried him. He also began noticing how life rewarded his perseverance. Opportunities appeared, relationships strengthened, and abandoned projects resurfaced. Not because the world changed, but because he changed. His view of himself and of life expanded. That expansion is one of the deepest marks of identity shift, when a once limited mind begins seeing possibilities instead of barriers. The most interesting part is that Christopher never noticed the exact moment when everything changed. There was no miraculous day, no dramatic turning point, no mystical awakening. The transformation happened like the seasons, slowly, inevitably, quietly. He simply woke up one day realizing he was a different man from who he had been a year and a half earlier. That's when he understood. True transformation isn't a result, it's a consequence. A consequence of small actions stacked with relentless consistency. A consequence of choices aligned with purpose. A consequence of accepting your flaws and still continuing. When this pattern repeats, life reorganizes itself around it. And that's exactly what happened to him. And as he celebrated this new stage, he began feeling a new inner calling, a desire to share the principles that transformed him, so others could find their own Ikigai. He didn't yet know how he would do that, but something inside him told him the next step would be just as revealing as the ones before. Japanese wisdom still had one last secret to offer. When Dr. Yamamoto began explaining the 5 philosophies that supported Christopher's transformation, he showed that, deep down, all of them point to the same direction, living in a simple, conscious way, aligned with what truly matters. He said humans complicate what was meant to be light, and as Christopher listened, he realized every step of his journey had been guided not by force, but by clarity. This clarity was the foundation of the identity shift, solidifying his new life. The doctor started with Ikigai, the reason for existing. He explained that no one can stay firm for long without a why that ignites their chest. Empty goals don't sustain change. But when purpose connects with the heart, something greater awakens inside a person. Christopher realized his Ikigai had been his family, but now it was expanding into something deeper, inspiring others through his transformation. That was purpose alignment growing like a root. Then came Kaizen, the philosophy of 1% per day. Dr. Yamamoto emphasized that big changes don't happen in leaps, but in small and continuous steps. Christopher was living proof of that. The glass of water, the short walk, the moderated meals, each action seemed insignificant alone, but together they created monumental strength. This repetition of small choices is the essence of relentless consistency that shapes identity without notice. Then the doctor presented Harai, also known as Hachibu, the art of moderation. He explained that eating less is not just for the body, it's also for the mind. Excess creates emotional and physical weight. Moderation brings internal space, clarity, and self-control. Christopher saw how this principle helped not only with weight loss, but with emotional balance and impulse control. He understood that moderation is courage disguised as simplicity. The 4th concept was Wabi-Sabi, the acceptance of imperfection. Dr. Yamamoto said beauty lies in what's real, not what's perfect. Life wasn't made to be flawless, but to be honest. Christopher remembered his own relapses and realized it was exactly during them that he grew stronger. The failures weren't enemies, they were teachers. This understanding brought lightness to his process and strengthened his Kaizen discipline, because he now knew a mistake doesn't destroy a path. Finally, the doctor presented Ganbaru, the philosophy of perseverance. He explained that persisting isn't continuing without failing. It's continuing despite failing. It's keeping your step even when the ground feels heavy. Christopher understood that Ganbaru was what sustained him on difficult days, the days when his mind wanted to quit. It was the silent flame saying, "One more step." That flame is the soul of relentless consistency. Dr. Yamamoto said these 5 philosophies together form a map for life. Ikigai gives direction. Kaizen creates evolution. Harai brings balance. Wabi-Sabi offers understanding. Ganbaru ensures continuity. It's as if each one plays a vital role in building the new self. And Christopher realized, deeply moved, that all these principles had intertwined in his journey, without him needing to memorize them. He lived them. He also understood something few people notice. These principles aren't rules. They're rhythms. Rhythms that can be incorporated into routines, work, relationships, finances, mental health. The secret isn't intensity but naturality, the ease with which they become part of life. And this naturality only appears when a person allows a deep, honest identity shift, free of rush. Christopher began reflecting on how each philosophy influenced different areas of his life. Ikigai shaped his family decisions. Kaizen guided his physical progress. Harai balanced his emotions. Wabi-Sabi protected his mental health. Ganbaru strengthened his daily resilience. It was a complete, simple, powerful system helping him grow without destroying himself in the process. Dr. Yamamoto reinforced that none of these philosophies existed to turn someone into a superhuman, but into a real human. Someone who feels, falls, rises, learns, and advances. There's no evolution without humanity. Purpose alignment only exists when a person accepts their truth and still chooses to move. And Christopher was becoming that kind of person, conscious, steady, and gentle with himself. As the doctor spoke, Christopher felt he wasn't just hearing concepts. He was hearing reflections of his own story. Each philosophy was like a lens revealing parts of himself he had never seen. It was as if everything finally made sense. The challenges, the victories, the relapses, the growth. Everything fit into a larger picture of continuous evolution. And that picture kept expanding. That he understood that now that he had this inner map, he could keep growing fearlessly. Growth no longer depended on motivation or brute force, but on relentless consistency. Effort was no longer a struggle. It had become a natural rhythm. And with this rhythm, he knew he could face any future challenge without losing balance. Dr. Yamamoto concluded by saying true wisdom isn't in memorizing principles, but living them with heart. He said, philosophy only has value when it becomes flesh in your routine. Christopher carried those words like a mantra. He knew he still had much to learn, but he also knew he already had the inner structure needed to keep growing. It was the beginning of a new phase, and as he absorbed each teaching, he realized there was still one last piece missing to complete his journey. Something essential to close the cycle of transformation and reveal the true essence of change. A simple teaching, capable of turning everything upside down. Identity. When Christopher finally looked at his own story from a bit of distance, he realized something that completely changed his view of transformation. He didn't overcome his struggles because he was strong, disciplined, or special. He overcame them because he became someone who keeps small daily promises. That was the root of everything. An identity shift so subtle no one sees it happening, yet so deep it changes every choice, every gesture, every step of the future. Dr. Yamamoto said most people try to change their lives based on motivation, but motivation is like smoke. It shows up beautifully and disappears quickly. What truly sustained Christopher's journey was the identity he built through small habits. Relentless consistency didn't come because he really wanted it, but because he began acting like someone who had already decided who he would be. And when identity changes, behavior merely follows. This realization freed Christopher from one of the biggest emotional prisons people carry, the idea that they need to feel motivated to act. He understood motivation as a consequence, not a cause. The cause is the minimal, daily, possible action. That's what ignited his Kaizen discipline. And that's what makes anyone evolve. When the mind realizes you keep your word, it stops sabotaging and starts cooperating. He also realized identity isn't built through big declarations or epic promises. It's built in minutes, in micro decisions, in the moment you choose to drink water instead of ignoring your body, in the moment you walk 20 meters instead of standing still, in the moment you eat consciously instead of excessively. These tiny silent gestures are the bricks of deep purpose alignment. Christopher understood no one changes their life by trying to be someone different. Change happens when you start doing what the person you want to become would do. It's an internal game, not an external one. And this game is won every single day, not on special occasions. That's why identity beats motivation. Identity is firm, constant, repetitive. Identity holds you even when motivation is gone. To his surprise, he realized his transformation wasn't merely physical. It had rebuilt his perception of himself. Before, he saw himself as someone weak, undisciplined, lost in his own routine. Now he saw someone capable, consistent, aligned. This new self-image was living proof of a consolidated identity shift. And when the mind embraces this new identity, everything around it shifts as well. He also realized the emotional transformation was deeper than the physical one. He felt calmer, less reactive, more grounded. Kaizen discipline brought stability. Wabi-Sabi brought lightness. Ganbaru brought strength. Harai brought balance. Ikigai brought meaning. It was as if every part of his inner world had found its place. That internal harmony was what truly sustained his evolution. With time, Christopher started noticing that the same small actions that saved him could help others too. He began sharing his journey with close friends, then co-workers, then strangers who crossed his path. The inspiration flowed naturally, effortlessly. And that happened because he didn't speak like someone who memorized theories. He spoke like someone who lived every step. Purpose, alignment, and practice. He often said something simple but powerful. You don't need to change everything. You just need to start. That sentence carried the essence of his journey, because he knew many people quit before trying, simply because they believe they need to do something perfect, enormous, impressive. But the truth is the impact comes from the small, repeated every day. Relentless consistency transforms any destiny. He liked to emphasize that no one needs to wait for the right day to change. The right day is the day you drink your first glass of water, walk your first 20 meters, eat consciously for the first time, accept your imperfections, persist even when you see no result. Every microaction is a vote for the identity you want to build. That's how a new self is born. Christopher also recognized that even after so much evolution, he wasn't finished. And that didn't scare him, it inspired him, because now he knew the journey continues. Kaizen discipline never ends, it evolves. And this continuity is what keeps life alive. Growth has no final destination. It has rhythm, presence, and purpose. And that's enough. He laughed, remembering how everything began, with a glass of water, the simplest gesture possible. And still, that gesture opened the door to a massive transformation. That's why he repeated, with conviction, that the problem is never the person. The problem is the method. When you change the method, life changes with it. The secret is simplicity applied with relentless consistency. Over the last few months, he began writing reflections in a notebook, not to show off, but to remember. And every page seemed to converge toward the same conclusion. I became someone who keeps promises. That sentence, though simple, carried the weight of his entire identity shift. He no longer sought motivation. He sought coherence. And that made all the difference. Deep down, Christopher felt that his story had become an invitation to anyone who feels stuck, tired, lost, or unmotivated. An invitation to start small, to start today, to start now. He knew there was still one final step to complete his journey, turning this message into something that could reach those who need it most. And it was exactly this desire that opened the path to the next chapter, a chapter where all his experience would be condensed, shared, and turned into a beacon for anyone seeking real change. A chapter where Japanese wisdom would meet identity, and where every person listening could begin their own journey of transformation. Now that you've walked through each stage of this Japanese system, pause for a moment and look inward, not to search for perfection, but to recognize movement. Because if you've made it this far, it is impossible that you are the same as when you began. Something inside you shifted, maybe small, maybe imperceptible, but real. And that is exactly how every great transformation begins. In the 1% no one sees, but that changes everything. The question now is not, does this work? You've just seen that it does. The real question is, will you apply it? Will you drink your first glass of water? Walk your first 20 meters? Choose to eat with more awareness today. Allow your identity to begin aligning with who you know you can become. Because in the end, what defines your life is not your past. It's what you choose to repeat every day. And I ask you sincerely, backhand index pointing right, how long will you postpone the life you want to live? Backhand index pointing right, how many times will you wait for motivation to do what you already know you must do? Backhand index pointing right. When will you finally allow yourself to evolve? The wheel of change is already turning inside you. And now it only depends on you to keep it alive. One step a day. One adjustment at a time. One decision every morning. That's how you build your next version. Not with brute force, but with relentless consistency, with Kaizen discipline, with purpose alignment born from the heart that if this content touched you, if it opened your eyes, if it brought clarity, if it awakened that silent flame you know is inside you, don't let it die when the video ends. Continue. Grow. Allow yourself to rise. And don't do it alone. Push pin subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, you will learn every day how to build a life that is 1% stronger, more disciplined, more conscious, and guided by purpose. This is the place where you grow on the inside and evolve on the outside as a consequence. The journey doesn't end here. It's only beginning. And the next version of you is much closer than you imagine.